Thanks very much. I'm gonna turn it over to Gisa to give a little intro, and then we'll get started.
Have Ashley here?
You want me to ping?
If you can ping her, Andrea, I just sent her an email too.
Oh yeah, that'd be awesome, Andrea. Maybe we give her a second.
Well, that's why I said we could start with our intro. She doesn't care about the intro, about who the COI is and stuff. She knows all of us, and she knows who she is. So
share my screen. Up here. Share. Oh, can you see my screen or no?
Yes.
Yep, I see it out there.
All right, you still can see it? All right, good deal. Okay, very good. Awesome. So agenda for the day, just some introductions to our COI leadership team. We're going to give a quick overview of the workshop that we're covering today. And then some Q&A. I think, Scott, you have some, you're going to run some through Q&A, and then obviously you'll probably open it up to some Q&A from our audience here. Obviously, we're an intimate group here, so don't hesitate to come off mute and ask your questions real time. And then obviously closing with that. So with that, on our leadership team, we have Scott Simpson from the DHS Procurement Innovation Lab. Say hello, Scott. Myself, Gisa Sateri, I'm a director within SAIC for our GSA account. I don't see Mike Scorney on the call. Is Mike on the call, Nicole?
I think he might be traveling this week.
Okay, so, that's right. He's away for the next 2 weeks, enjoying himself. We have Mike Scorney, who is our government vice chair from GSA FedSim. Nicole Santerio with Booz Allen, who's our industry vice chair. And Nicole, say hello. And Terrell Russell from JPI, who's our programs chair. And I believe Terrell could not make the call today. And Ben Margolin, you're here. And Ben Margolin's one of our advisors on our team. Now let me know if Ashley's here so I can. Okay,
she's here.
awesome. Very good. So our guest speaker today is Ashley Owens. Some of you may know her from her days at 18F. She used to be the 18F acting executive director and the director of the 18F acquisition chapter. Her current role is the senior acquisition strategist on the GSA service delivery team, and that team's housed right under the GSA CTO office. Her main role is serving as a digital acquisition expert and helping GSA programs and teams better procure technology, products, and services. In addition, she's also spearheading the agency's initiatives such as user-centered procurement and GSA's first fundamentals acquisition with Agile methodologies. And that's what we're going to learn about today, actually. She's going to talk us through that training course. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley to tell us a little. I want to steal her thunder around what the training is and how you can learn more about it. So with that, I will turn it over to Ashley and let her tell us a little bit more about the training course.
Okay, I was gonna do I have time to show some slides, just some visuals?
Yeah, definitely, Ashley.
Yes, okay. Yes. I'm going to unstop sharing so that you can start sharing.
I love a good deck because I repurpose so many decks. So this deck it will have a May date, but it's relevant. Let's see. First, let's make sure I can pull it up.
You did not update your slide deck for us?
It's surprising in government, the information is the same.
She just got back from a great beach vacation, so she's got her priorities right.
Yeah, I try not to be braggadocious about it, but I will say I started my career as a contracting officer, where I had no life, the months of July, August, and September. And one of the craziest things for me when I became a procurement analyst and got more into consulting, even though I'm in the federal government, is that yeah, you don't have the same fiscal year deadline pressure. So I've been to Mexico a couple of fiscal year ends. It's also like a safer time to travel hurricane wise. Okay, so let's view
Good
slideshow.
for you. We saw your glow, so.
Okay, so the actual name of the course is
So far, I only see a black screen, Ashley.
oh really? It says
Yeah.
oh, it does say my
These are,
screen is paused. Is that like a security thing, you think?
I don't know. If you just click, I can see your mouse.
Can you all see
Yeah.
my screen at all? It says you were
No,
screen sharing.
I can.
No.
Oh, it says I'm screen sharing. Do I have like host privileges? Is it like a
Yeah,
Yeah.
Renata, do you mind checking to see if it was passed from me to Ashley?
because it's telling me I am screen sharing, but I'll stop.
Let me do
And
that.
yeah, and oh, technology. Sheesh.
Yeah.
Okay, Google Chrome.
Maybe you want to tell us as you're doing that, Ashley, what was the
Okay.
inspiration for developing this training?
There we go. Now we see it.
Oh, great. Okay. All right. The inspiration. I have a lot of things in my head, and I don't always get them out publicly. Like, so
All
I
right.
utilize them inside GSA and things like that. And if you've talked to me, I've definitely talked about this. I am working on coming out with a public guide that is like shareable via URL link. So it wouldn't matter if you were in the government or outside. You'll be privy to it. So, now you can see my screen. I won't share this deck, but I wanted to show this slide because the course that I built with the Office of Government-Wide Policy is in CSOD. Don't ask me what CSOD stands for, but it is the platform where we do all of our training, acquisition wise, if you're a core, things like that. So it's behind a wall right now. This is why I'm working on a more public or shareable guide. But like I was saying, that the actual name of the course is a mouthful. It's De-risking IT acquisitions with Agile methodologies, the fundamentals of Agile acquisition. And actually the course that's out now is just one of what is intended to be a series of courses. And it takes you to the acquisition planning process. So that's where we stop this one. The next one will be around the solicitation and different principles. We talk about draft solicitation. We'll have one on evaluation because we use very different evaluation techniques in this process. And then post-award, because if you all know, or if you've been looking, 18F came out with like a next iteration of their de-risking guide. And one of the main changes in that is around post-award, because the execution of the contract is honestly one of the most important parts, right? With our industry partners, and we know a collaborative industry environment and post-award isn't often heard of, right? Like a lot of times, from the waterfall days, we just give a contractor requirements and we're like, hey, go be great, hope they're great, and that's it. But we're trying to introduce a more partnership-like environment. Okay, so I just wanted you to see this slide because that is the title of the class, if anyone was curious. And then you can always hit me up on LinkedIn, or if you're in GSA, of course, you can G-chat me. But the slide I actually wanted to share is this one. So hopefully I can share this now. Okay, can everyone see this now?
Yes, we can. I can.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to breeze through these slides because like I said, it is a previous deck. I didn't feel the need to redo a deck because the information is still the same. You already know who I am. I still do ask people if they've heard of user-centered procurement because I kind of had an epiphany after a project. Like, you know what, this isn't exactly agile acquisition. It's really user-centered procurement because not to get too in the weeds, but acquisition is a thing and procurement is a thing. And procurement is dealing with the larger process of the need. So a lot of times when I do these talks, I first ask folks, have you heard of user-centered procurement? Because this is something that I just had a realization in going through the process. But to level set, agile acquisition, what I consider it to be, is the application of agile methods to the federal procurement process. But user-centered procurement is the process of understanding user needs to determine what products and or services to buy. Because oftentimes we start off with the solution. My favorite example is when folks are like, I need a chat bot. And I'm like, do you need a chat bot? Or did you talk to your users to see, like, maybe it's your content, maybe the content on your website is hard to understand. And you don't actually need a bot. You just need better like words, that's totally possible. So anyways, the process of understanding user needs to determine what products and or services to buy. I won't go into why it matters. I love showing this visual just because my mental journey to where I am now in procurement comes from, I came from USDA. That's where I started my contracting career, which gave me like a really, really good foundation. It's also where I started to realize like, ooh, our tech contracts, we're not realizing the value or the outcomes that we're seeking. And it's not because the vendors aren't performing. It's because they are performing to the requirements that we've written, and we're not happy. So I'm like, there's something wrong. There's something broken with the requirements process. I didn't quite know what that was until I joined GSA TTS 18F. But I like to show this visual because the upper layer is what we're like used to, right? We like write a lot of requirements. We outsource to a vendor to like go be great. And then when everything lands, it's like we're unhappy or we need a whole change management team. And it's like, well, why? And it's because we're not following a more agile, collaborative, iterative process. Okay, so I just want to show this visual is essentially what the course is, except it's the first 3 blocks. So let me explain the visual a little bit. The larger blue arrows is what I like to say that no matter who you are, government, outside of government, 1102, non, we can kind of all agree these are the high level parts of the procurement process in federal government. Because I know they say if you put 5 1102s in a room, you can get 5 different answers and they can literally all be right? Because contracting is more of an art than a science. And I love that the FAR is written that way. But yeah, the larger blue boxes are what we can all agree are like the larger parts of the process. The light blue boxes are the agile methods that we put on top. And this is kind of what I like to say, that this user-centered procurement to me is a derivative of the de-risking guide. The de-risking guide goes through all of these same like practices and principles and things you can do. But if anybody knows me, I'm very practical. I like to give the example that I don't prefer flowers as a gift as opposed to like a universal remote that can be used on any television forever. I'm in, right? But yeah, I'm a practical person, and I was just like, okay, well, if someone was reading de-risking guide, like they might be like, well, how do I even do this in my office, whether I'm a contracting office or a tech office? And that's kind of like how this landed. So when we do our projects, we don't start with requirements definition. We start with product framing, which is a problem statement and a product vision for your technology thing. I mean, usually we do that in a workshop setting. It takes about an hour of time versus like a bunch of back and forth and documents. But this sets the stage of the problem we're trying to solve, because we write a lot of contracts, but the intention of contracts are to solve problems. We're not really just buying things just to buy them. These are still taxpayer dollars, and they should be, used for the benefit of either taxpayers or internal users who are also taxpayers. And then market research, we still do a lot of the traditional market research things, but one of the things that we do that's a lot different is we do user research. And a big part of user research is not only understanding that the contract that we're writing is solving the problem for the end user, but it's also to validate against the problem statement. Because that's one thing I love about Agile. In Agile, there's lots of validation points and there are lots of feedback loops. And that's also what this process offers into the federal procurement process. So yeah, we do user research, and that lets us know like, okay, the problem that we think is happening is actually happening, or maybe we have to tweak our problem a little bit, or tweak our product vision a little bit. And when we have a better sense of those user needs and user pain points and those things, we can do better technical discovery in the market. So of course we do the normal technical discovery because I'm blessed to be on a team with software engineers and UXers and product managers and things like that. Like we are a full agile cross-functional team. Everyone in the government is not on such a team. But what I do love about knowing the user needs and pain points is now we can look at the market and say like, okay, these are all our user needs. Is there a COT software that solves like 80 to 90% of this? And like the other 10% is us changing like a little bit of our business processes or something like that. Or there's really nothing in the market that satisfies all these user needs. We might have to custom build something. Or is there something that satisfies, you know, the crux of what we need, but there's like configuration and things we need to do on top. All of these things are, you can see better if you have the user research. And so that's what I like about the technical discovery and market research. And the lovely thing about this process is it de-risks your ACT strategy, right? So now that you know your user needs and now that you have a good sense if there's hot software that solves the problem, if you're going to need a blend of some sort, or if like none of these things exist and you're going to have to custom build something because your user needs are so unique, you've inherently de-risked what you go to buy, right? Because you know that what you're going to buy is in fact for the users, and the course stops there. So I'm showing you the entire visual. The future courses will go into other techniques we use like draft solicitations, because I often say, you know, a lot of folks have fear around protests. And I always like to say, well, industry doesn't have many methods of saying they don't like something, right? Or they have an issue with it. And if we issued more draft solicitations, that gives industry a place to react, and let us know like, hey, this doesn't make any sense, or hey, this seems very unfair. Those kinds of things. If we do a draft solicitation, which is still technically market research, if you're an acquisition nerd, but this is one of the techniques we use, and that it will be in like future courses. I always say vendor submission is the same no matter what you do, right? And then in evaluation, we do a lot of different techniques. For instance, if we know that we need custom software development services leading to anything, and a good example I use is like Drupal, right? Like if there's websites and it's on Drupal, you're going to need PHP developers. PHP is a programming language. And so we ask for code repositories. They can be private code repositories or public, even though we promote open source development. And we have our engineers go through those code repositories to get a sense of how the vendor works and how they work in teams and how clean their code is and things like that. And it's been eye-opening. We've had evaluations where some vendors, you know, submitted a bid, but were probably ill prepared, and it looks like they spun up a code repository overnight. And then we see others that are like, oh, you can like clearly tell that they work very well in a cross-functional team. They have a good UX presence combined with the developers and things like that. And for COT software, we do usability testing. So in our solicitations, we let folks know like, hey, the software that you are presenting to the government, we're going to have actual users do what we call our table stakes task. Because the idea is, or I like to say, the COTS you buy is the COTS you get. Buying COTS thinking that you're going to like configure it from something that's not even, and 18F talks about this in their de-risking guide, they call it UMOTS, is not a thing. The idea around COTS is that a lot of problems that we have in the government have been solved many times before. And so naturally, industry has created products that solve these problems. All of this makes sense, but it's on us to make sure that the products that we buy are solving the user need. And so, yeah, we have usability testing as a part of the evaluation criteria. And that's also where we do our 508 testing, which can be really telling because, you know, this industry is allowed to build products with whatever IP that they decide to build it in. But we do have 508 requirements and accessibility requirements. And so that's another thing that we test. And then, of course, like I said, post-award becomes one of the most critical parts. Even if we buy COT software, we have usability testing on the configuration and things like that. And so all of these are future courses that will be realized. But like I said, the course that is available in CSOD now, unfortunately, is not available outside of CSOD. is dealing with the first 3 blocks, which is applying agile methods to requirements definition, market research, and ultimately de-risking the ACT strategy. And am I at time?
No, I was just going to come on and say, the fact that it's not available publicly is one of the reasons why we wanted you to come today, because
Okay.
people like Gisa and Nicole are in industry, and we've got a lot of other industry partners here, and so this is kind of like their peek behind the curtain. And so, do you want to keep going, or do you want to see if there's any questions?
I can. I was going to go a little bit more in depth into the 3 blocks, because in my mind, if we write better contracts, then I feel like industry can better respond to us. To me, a win-win.
Yeah.
And
I did get.
Okay.
I got one question, so maybe we can have that one question answered, then we'll keep going.
Okay.
The question someone sent me was, the things that you've been talking about so far are pretty IT and tech heavy. So is that the primary focus of this, or could this also be used for other procurements, like a more traditional one?
Yeah, I like to say my niche and my passion area is for sure technology acquisition. I don't know that it can't be applied to other things, but I like came up in the beginning doing construction contracting, and I always like to say I don't know if I would build a bridge or a road agile, right? Like I think you should probably spec things like that out.
Maybe.
And it's like, it's okay. But does it mean that you can't look at what users care about and what pain points exist to spec out your bridge better or spec out your thing better? Not saying that. Even with general consulting, I think a part of this process can be leveraged probably to other things, because it's still making sure that you're buying the right services or a product to solve a need. I just haven't personally applied it to anything beyond technology.
Thanks. Yeah. Cool.
Okay. All right. So product framing. I mentioned this. So what we do with our groups when they come to us, and actually I think they find it very therapeutic, is they tell us all the problems they're having. But even with a million problems, it can probably be deduced into 2 sentences overall about what the overarching problem is. And that's kind of what we do with our teams when they come to us with a need. And so it's called product framing. On the slide you saw previously, I say problem statement and product vision. And I just wanted to show you a visual of what the document looks like. So it's very plain language. That is also how we write our contracts. I use myself as an example, not other 1102s, but I like to say my previous solicitations read like dissertations. And I'm like, what are you buying? I was industry, I'd be like, what is the government buying? Because I really can't tell. And if you don't have a large business with a whole bid proposal team, you might never understand, and you might really find it hard to respond. So yeah, we're trying to write things a lot more plain language too. That's another part of this process. So yeah, problem framing, we literally describe what we're trying to get at there, describe the problem you're looking to solve by identifying who's affected, what is affecting them, where the problem is happening, and when the problem happens. And we let them dump in the doc. GSA happens to sit on a Google platform, but I'm pretty sure Microsoft has the same capabilities. But we co-work in a doc together in these workshops, and that's also how we draft our solicitations. By the way, it cuts down on version control immensely among other things. And same thing with problem statement. We give clear instructions on problem framing, and then product vision. And all of these things become important because in our contracts, whether it's a COT SPY or it's custom software, the problem statement and product vision become the scope of the contract. And that's what allows our contracts to work so flexible with the vendor, because theoretically or technically, any work we do that leads up to that product vision is fair game and is in scope. which is why we have to partner with our vendor, talk to our vendor through all of those different agile rituals like sprint planning, like stand-ups and things like that. But the ultimate purpose of the doc is to clarify the problem space for the intended audience and create a basic definition of success for the product. Because a lot of times, like, we want everything, right? I'm sure somebody wants a hologram that sits in the living room and like tells you whatever, but that's like not priority right now. And so this cuts down on a lot of issues that might happen in a project team where folks think one group, because they care about this, they think we're going to buy this thing, and then the other group that cares about that thinks we're going to buy that thing. We eliminate that by everyone being on the same page about what problem we're trying to solve, and why this version of the product is the successful version. And like I said, it documents a shared understanding of the vision and scope of a specific product or feature set that the team will build or buy.
When you're talking about, I think you mentioned the definition of done, right?
That's part of, yeah, that's definitely a part
You
of our
mentioned something else. You're like metric to measure success. How do you define success?
Yeah.
How do you work with people who are used to like a requirements and SOW, or who are looking at a waterfall approach and say, well, my definition of success is if the vendor does X, Y, and Z, and I get to 98%. Like, how do you reshape that conversation into more of an agile approach to fit your problem statement?
Yeah, that's a great question. Naturally, when we start off defining the problem and the product vision, they seem to have different realizations. Because I can't say that I've had to convince anyone. Like, I wish I had a story like that. But it's usually it's usually not me alone in these meetings. It's usually me paired with either a product manager, or I'm paired with a UXer. And for the most part, because of the way we start, which is defining the problem, it makes them rethink success, is what I've realized. Because in a traditional environment, when you just issue requirements, success is they did what I said they were going to do. But success looks different when you're only describing the problem and the outcomes. And you're trusting industry to pair with you on the how to get there, because we're not defining the how, we're just defining the problem and the outcomes, which is the second part of the doc, right? Like, what are the goals of the product? So we take their mind out of requirements. It's like, what do you want this thing to do? Like, what's your goal? Because that's why you're going to buy something. And then we have them prioritize those things. Because like I said, like, maybe you want a hologram that sits in the living room and helps somebody write something, but like, that's not what we need first. So we have them write down all their goals, and then we prioritize all the goals. And one of the things I love is we also talk about what's out of scope, because that like creeps in a lot when you're on project teams too. Like, you'll get near the end and somebody's like, well, wait a minute, I thought we were going to have this extra feature that did this. And it's like, no, we talk about this in the beginning. So we decide from day one what is out of scope. And out of scope doesn't mean it will never get bought or it never happen. It's out of scope for the contract that we're issuing now. Maybe it's in the next option year. Maybe it's another contract, because it's really more adjacent than intertwined, things like that. And of course, we talk about risk, but it's just a 2-page document that gives a lot of value. And then I talked about the fact that we do user research. We have templates for our user research plans. And I know a lot of government offices don't have, user researchers necessarily on staff, but I always like to say this is something that I would totally contract out for. If I didn't have those kinds of folks on staff. And this is the government. So you can always give them this template, like hire a user research firm. This is the template they use. We put this in our contract files. And it just talks about the research goals, research questions, basically creating a plan. And then we use that UX, which a lot of people ask me like, well, how much time does that take? And I'm like, well, I can tell you our halt times are significantly less than the halt time that you use the right requirements. And I would argue that, but it gives more value because we're really focusing on the end user and not just telling a vendor what to do, as opposed to trusting that a vendor will know what to do if we can describe the problems and pain points the right way. So we analyze and synthesize those user research findings. And we use that, like I said, to validate against the product framing document. So the user research will tell us like, yeah, we're on the right track with the problem, or, ooh, we were like way off. We need to change this and change our product vision. But either way, like I said, it serves as the validation points, and it helps us to know better what we need to go survey the market for in terms of products that already exist and things like that. Which leads me to this document. And this is the document that comes out. So we're used to our traditional market research templates, and we still have those, right? I sit in GSA, and if you know anything about GSA, we buy things, a lot of things for a lot of people. So everything is very, very templated because we're buying for so many different groups, including DoD. But these are additional documents, like I said, that we have in our contract files. And one of them is a technical discovery document. Like I said, we take those user research points and we survey the market to see if there's COTS software. Low code, no code is still COTS. Things like that that can solve the problem. And we put all of that in a document. So we always look at the current thing and like, is that salvageable, right? We still follow the FAR in terms of FAR Part 8 required sources of supply. We look at what we have in the agency, and we write pros and cons for everything. Pros and cons of trying to salvage the current thing, pros and cons of software and things that we already have in the agency, pros and cons of things we found out in the market that seem like they might solve our problem. I will say, we don't necessarily optimize. What I found in technology buying is a lot of people optimize only for security, right? So if it's not FedRamped, it's like, oh, I don't want to go buy it. And even FedRAMP says in their FAQs, if that will hamper competition, do not have that as an evaluation criteria, right? So even when we're looking at security and things like that, that is still examined. That is a part of the pros and cons. But maybe FedRAMP authorization will hinder competition, and so we don't always lead with that. I want to make sure I say that. And we look at custom, like what is the cost of custom building things? Because believe it or not, we don't always recommend that folks custom build a thing, right? Like a good example is payroll when it comes to construction contracts. And that was a recent project that we had. When I say recent, within the last year, because this is government. And it's like, hey, we talked to a lot of states that were using like really cool COT software to attest for payroll and construction. And we looked at the data and the format of the data that comes from Department of Labor. And it's like, ooh, this data would be really hard to pull out even with a good API because of how the data is structured. So right now we were like, it's probably best that you go procure some kind of COTS or prepackaged software. That's like a good example, but we still went through the notion of like, if you did decide to buy something, here are the pros and cons of that. Here are the pros and cons. And so ultimately this document just helps GSA and whoever else is using it make a technology decision that's based on the best available information at the time, right? And this inherently becomes your acquisition strategy. And we allow the product owner, which is usually the program office, to make this decision. We don't always participate depending on what the decision is, because for certain decisions, they don't necessarily need our help, right? And like I said, GSA is big. So there's a lot of offices that do contracting. I'm not a warranted contracting officer. I'm a consultant that sits within GSA. So I can only advise. But yeah, I just love that it puts the power back on him in their hands, right? Because they're becoming it. It's also teaching them what ownership feels like, right? Government ownership of their products and the decisions they're making.
I love how these templates that you just showed really go into like the analysis of what happened beforehand, so that if you picked up the document, you could really read through it and understand the whole team's. It's not just here's why we need to do this. It's like, well, you're missing a whole lot of information, but if you have like option 1, option 2 with the pros and cons, now you're getting more of the story. And pros and cons are really easy for people to develop because we do that. Like, that is how I buy a car, right? Like, I'm not going out there and writing down like all of my market research stuff that's required by the car. I do pros and cons. Well, this car over here is going to, go further on a tank of gas, but this car over here is going to seat 4 people or 5 people, whatever else. Like, it's just more intuitive that way. One of the questions we got. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We got the question of, do people have to take the class in CSAUD to get these templates, or is there somewhere else they can find them?
Usually I'm okay with sending templates. I always say, like, I have a MacBook. I don't want to get into why I don't have Microsoft Word for whatever reason on my laptop. It's been years. I don't even try anymore. So I can download it into a doc. I cannot open it. So usually like the easy button for me is sending PDFs. I'm always happy to send those to folks in government. I think I would have to ask about sending them to folks in industry, which I'm totally okay with doing. I just want industry to know, like, hey, we're thinking about it. Like we're like trying to develop things that make sense and that are thoughtful. Like our slogan, when if you know the history of 18F, before acquisitions was a part of 18F, 18F really just built things, which is like how they derived from the PIF program when healthcare.gov failed, and it was like a realization like we need this expertise in the government. But before 18F had acquisition as a part of their agile process, we had a group called ACT-IAC. And ACT-IAC was basically an 18F, but with acquisition, because I like to say in the government, everything is acquisition adjacent. And our slogan was making procurement joyful. And everybody would laugh when I said that. Like, to this day, everybody like laughs. It's like, no, but buying things can really be fun. It can really be a joyful experience if you like do it the right way and you're like focused on the users and things like that. But yeah, that technical discovery doc, that is the idea behind it, to make it like digestible, and leadership loves it because leadership knows what they're saying yes to budget wise, right? Like, they'll live in a hierarchy. Even though a budget has been given to us, we still have to justify like why we're spending dollars where. And that's another thing I like about that document. It's like really good for a leader that's like, I don't know what y'all are doing, but what are you doing? It's perfect for that. And the decision point I like to call is the build, buy, or blend decision. I have an entire deck just on build, buy, blend. Happy to come share that at another point, but it's bigger. So I could not do it here. And I wrote it with one of the engineers. She and I got together and we're like, giving people like why you might go custom build a thing, why you might go buy a thing, why you might need a blend of things. But essentially that is the decision point. Are you gonna, because this is tech. So the real talk is you're either gonna build it, you're gonna buy it, or it's gonna be a blend of those two things. Just like full stop. And that's what the technical discovery doc helps you do. And this is the last thing I'll say. This is not, like I said, a part of the course, but because industry is in this call, that build, buy, or blend decision also lets us know what kind of work statement we issue, right? So if it's a custom software build, we'll do a statement of objectives, because the idea is we're going to be working pure agile, right? It's the government. So I don't want to say super pure, like the first sprint is usually what we call sprint 0, because like all the admin stuff and paperwork you got to fill out to get access and all the other things. And we try to do way more collaborative kickoff meetings. Like our kickoff meetings aren't typically like 1 hour. It's like a week long kickoff. Or we're trying to establish like agile rituals. We do a deck. Like we're trying to establish with our industry partners that this is a collaborative effort. So a lot of those different things are not necessarily traditional from where I came from, at least. But yeah, a statement of objectives from when it's a custom build. When it's COTS, a statement of work, where we also clearly define, or we'll ask the vendor to define, like, what is configuration versus customization?
Mm-hmm.
There's a line there. And like I said, theoretically, if you're going to buy COTS, you already know all of your user pain points. And we usually have what we call a scorecard, where the contractor can self-select all of the user needs that their software can solve for. Like I said, an evaluation, we still do a usability test. But yeah, you expect to see a statement of work and a scorecard, because theoretically the COTS is already thought to solve the problem. And when it's a blend, and a blend usually comes about when it's like low code, no code, or like there's some COTS that's really, really configurable. Or some companies build open source platforms. So the platform itself might be proprietary, but all the things you can do on top can be customized if you know, whatever program language. And those are usually what we would call the blend. And we use performance work statements for those, because the idea is there's still like a large portion that's outcome focused. We have user stories in all of these versions, but there's some things like we just got to do. Right? And that's what I love about a performance work statement, is like a combination of both. There's like some things that are like totally required and you can't get around them, but then there's also things that are outcome focused. And all of these things, we also workshop creating these work statements with the group. So, I think we do like 1 to 2 hours across 2 days, but like writing a solicitation in 4 hours versus writing a solicitation over like months, I will take that any day. And usually we can get the solicitation done in 3 days max.
That's amazing, Ashley. 3 days is fantastic for getting the
Right.
solicitation.
That's my bragging point. It's like,
yeah,
do a solicitation in 3 days. And that is the draft solicitation that we typically put out to industry for them to give us feedback. And we ask for authentic, real feedback on different areas, especially areas where there might have been like some consternation internally. Instead of going back and forth internally, we're like, let's just ask the industry what they think. A good example was the Smart Pay acquisition, which I can share because that's available on GitHub. We really do try to put most of our solicitations on GitHub if we can. And there was just like, oh, are vendors going to be cool with being paid via a credit card? Or do they really want an EFT? Like, we went back and forth about it, and we were like, let's just ask them. And industry came back and was like totally cool with being paid via credit card. So we left it in, just that's like a low stakes example, but just an example of how we try to be like very authentic and human centered, even in like the questions we're asking industry as well.
I'm going to get with you on how to leverage GitHub for DHS solutions.
Oh yeah.
Samit's asking, where are the solicitations posted? Do you just do them on FBO or SAM or GitHub, or where do you suggest?
That's a great question. Like I said, I'm not a warranted contracting officer, so a lot of times whether something ends up on GitHub or not is dependent on the contracting officer that I'm paired with. And we are at GSA, so a lot of our solicitations go out on schedules.
Okay. So eBay.
Yeah, right, eBay.
Yeah.
So rarely do we end up posting on FBO unless we do a special notice on FBO to let folks know, like, hey, this is available on eBay, which at least lets businesses know that aren't on eBay, like, hey, if you have any kind of relationships with other businesses that are on GSA schedules, they can always, of course, contact them to sub or, whatever team and arrangement they might want to create. But a large reason why we also put them on GitHub is it's for one, it's us working in the open and trying to be true to Agile principles, but we want to meet industry where they are. And because my niche is custom software development, a lot of developers put code in GitHub. And so like the hope is like even businesses that like never thought about doing business with the government before, they might see it and say like, hey, I could like totally build this.
That's cool.
Yeah. Now, what happens after that? Like going through sam.gov and all of the motions to do business with the government, like apologize ahead of time if it feels like cumbersome. But We just want to like pique interest. And then it's good for conversations like this because like I said, I can like, you know, share links with industry and government that are publicly available.
Yeah.
Um,
We got another question from David.
Okay.
What are the best ways to collaborate with you to influence future guidance and training around the agile procurement or user-centered procurement process?
That's a great question. I'm on like a lot of task groups, but they do feel quite internal. So honestly, a lot of people like message me on LinkedIn. Obviously LinkedIn is my personal LinkedIn. My thoughts and views shared there are not necessarily of my employer, but that's one of the best ways to reach me besides my government email. And I actually do like talking to folks in industry. A
Me
good
too.
example is I have strong feelings on fixed price sprints, or fixing anything that is said to be agile. And if you know me, you know this. Everybody else does not. But I remember talking to a vendor one day and they were like, we love fixed price sprints. It's like, really? That's like super surprising. But they laid out the case of why for them as a business, it makes it like more even secure financially for them. Like all the reasons that I wouldn't have thought of, right? Because for the version that I do, I'm like, I just want it like super collaborative. Like we're not worried about the dollars, but I also have, you know, staff that can like do what the vendor does so we can account for each other a different way and things like that. But
Yeah.
I say that to say, if you are interested in collaborating or guidance, like besides, there are some communities of practice, I think, where industry can also participate. I'm new to ACT-IAC. So maybe I should get more involved here. That would be one way. I can talk to Scott about that.
Yes, please.
Or Andrea. Yeah, other than that, I would just say, feel free to shoot me a email. I will say I love Slack. We don't have a Slack where industry can reach us. That's like a dream of mine.
Or like a nightmare for a CEO, maybe.
Oh yeah, because I'm like, email. It's like
LinkedIn. We'll go with LinkedIn.
Yeah, let's just go with LinkedIn because as soon as you email me, I'm already thinking more formal. That's why I like a good chat or a good DM.
You mentioned that you were trying to turn the training into like a guide that could be released. What does that process look like for, you know, timeline and everything else?
That's a great question. It's all dependent on me.
Okay.
The only thing that's I have another deliverable that I'm working on right now, called a website contracting toolkit. And that will also be available publicly. So I'm trying to finish that up first. And the idea behind that is most people interact with their government digitally. There's a law, 21st Century Idea Act, that has different requirements for public facing websites. But a lot of people have struggled to implement those or write the right contracts for industry to help them implement those. And so the thought was, in the executive order, GSA was asked to do a thing. And so the thought was, okay, like we'll put out this toolkit publicly that we hope agencies can use. And then industry can kind of already get insight into what we'll be writing or putting out and things like that.
Yeah, okay. Great.
Yeah, when that's resolved, then I'll be working on that. So I would say maybe like
Sometime before Christmas, I think, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm thinking more spring of next year.
Gisa, I see you've got a question.
So two things, I guess, Ashley. One, is the training going to be offered like internally to the COs within GSA? I mean, obviously, you know, the hope is that like everybody across the board agencies will kind of adopt or look or take the training through CSOT. But is that something you're working on like internally as well as externally, or are you super hyper focused on externally?
With the course itself?
Yeah.
Yeah, the course, like I said, I sit under the CTO's office. And so that's not typically what the CTO office does. As we usually like partner with the Office of Government-Wide Policy, or that's usually the group that's focused on like the courses and stuff like that. Yeah. So
yeah,
those are internal until they're not, I guess. But that's also why I was like, oh, I should do a guide similar to 18F, because what I do like about that is it's not, even though it's not a course, it's not behind a wall either.
Yeah. But
It's
anyone in the government can get onto CSOD and take this course, right? It's not just for
yes,
GSA folks. Anyone
yes.
across the
Once you
government.
have if you have a .gov or a .mil,
Yep.
you
Okay.
can take this course.
Okay. And then the other
And
part
then,
of the
oh, go ahead, Visa.
question,
Yep.
the other part of the question was, you know, I love the what you've laid out on the solicitations of how you talked about, you know, like custom, it's an SOO. So is that, do you see that as the best practice currently, or do you see that as something that you're actually teaching through this course? Because we plenty of times, you know, see, I think on the industry side, custom that comes out with a PWS.
Yeah.
So,
I would say I see it as a best practice. 18F actually, I think this is like in the de-risking guide. That's why I like to say like, oh, well, my user-centered procurement process, I feel like is a derivative of the de-risking guide. I just don't know if it's like super, super clear, because the de-risking guide is, if you're a project manager, it might might be easier for you to read than like if you're a procurement person. So I guess how I answer that is I think it should be a best practice because the work statement should be applicable to the thing you're buying. So yeah, that's all I'll say.
Yeah, love it. And you know that the team, the de-risking guide team came over and did the training. They did
Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So
Yes.
this is like a perfect
Yeah, I mean, I came from
follow-up.
18F, like you said in the intro. So like a lot of my thoughts and things like that, I like to say I drink the Kool-Aid there. Like Agile, it works. Okay, great. Let's see how we can do it.
So my last question is this is kind of a cliffhanger, right? Like this is season 1 of the user-centered procurement show. There's the solicitation phase, the evaluation, award, admin. When do we get to see that material?
That's a great question. We are still the government, so I think that depends on budget. And you know, the budget that OGP has for these courses, because actually OGP does a lot of different courses. They have a lot of great courses out, especially in the area of C-Scrum, cybersecurity, supply chain, which is a big deal. Things like that. So yeah, I think it depends on like where it falls budget wise and priority of, you know, for what folks are procuring for.
Well, I just hope this TV show isn't canceled before we get to the conclusion.
I hope not either. If not, I guess that's where I have to use my LinkedIn platform.
There you go. Are there any other questions before we drop off here?
I think Andrea came on camera. You were going to ask something,
Yeah.
Andrea? Oh, no? Okay. I
Finally able to come on camera.
Well, Ashley, thank you a whole lot for being here today. This has been probably one of our best COI meetings. You were much better than the de-risking folks. Yeah.
Oh no, don't say that.
No, I'm just teasing. You got a lot of competition. We had Andrea in person over the summer, so you've got big shoes to fill. But it's always great to see everybody, and big thank you to Ashley for coming. If you've got questions for her, you can either filter them through me, you can reach out to her on LinkedIn like she suggested, and hopefully we can share some of the documents fed to Fed later on. If you would like to get continuing learning points for this, there's an email that you can email. It's training@actiac.com or org. I always forget. We'll drop it in the chat. It's also in the slides. But you can get 1 CLP for attending this training, and that goes for you as well, Ashley, if you'd like 1 CLP to start working towards your next cycle or whatever.
Yeah, I'll take it.
We've got more events coming up. So we will be at ACT-IAC's Emerging Leader Conference at the end of October. And so if you're there, come and say hello. On Monday, we'll have a table for breakfast, and you're welcome to come and join us for breakfast or coffee or pastries or whatever else. You can also, we'll also have a panel there about Workforce 2030. And so if you're at ELC, come to that panel. It's in the afternoon at 2:15. and you can hear about how procurement is going to be shaped by the workforce of 2030 and disruptive technologies. We'll also have our next meeting on November 14th. If some of you may have seen that we partnered with an ACT-IAC Associates class this year, and the Associates class did a survey about industry, government communication, and relationship building. And they're going to share with us their findings and then have a discussion with some of the people who participated in that survey. And just to tease the survey, it'll be, or the findings, it's going to be really interesting, because what they found was that when industry engages in relationship building, they're building it for long-term relationships. And when government is engaging with relationship building, they're going short-term, like solicitation-based relationship building. And so those two, to me, are very dichotomous. And so the conversation is going to be really excellent about how we bring those two together so that we can find an overlap and build relationships effectively between industry and government, which is, of course, super important. So look for that on our website. It'll be November 14th, but I think it's another Thursday, and we're going to have it at 4 o'clock. So same bat time, same bat channel, for any of you old enough to remember that reference. And with that, a big thank you to Gisa for the introduction. A big thank you to Nicole and for everyone for joining us today. And I hope that I'll see some of you at ELC. Ashley, you're going to be at ELC?
Yes, I will be at ELC. This is my first time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent. We'll be there to cheer you on. Thank you so much for being here today.
No problem.